Hello and welcome to this special Facebook broadcast with the Northeast manufacturing firm Ebac. A couple of weeks ago, Pamela Petty, a woman I've known for a long time, asked me to host this broadcast to talk about the products, the philosophy and the economic impact of the business her father, John, founded in the Northeast. Now, if you have a home with condensation, or if you want to wash your clothes in a machine that's energy efficient, or if you plan to install 21st century heating in the form of heat pumps, Ebac has products that can help you. Now, I said to Pamela that nobody could get her father to talk about this remarkable business better than herself. So in a moment, we'll set Pamela loose on John and she'll have questions that'll tell you the story of his history in manufacturing. But before I do, if you're watching and you're watching live, you can comment or ask questions on this feed. Towards the end, we'll put some of the questions to both Pamela and John. We've received some questions already from our earlier feeds and we'll put them to Pamela and John too. In the meantime, over to Pamela Petty and John Elliott, MBE.
Thank you, Graham. Be careful what you ask. Thanks for firing that back at me. So anyway, Dad, tell us, how did you get into the sort of business of drying equipment?
Well, I started off as an apprentice many years ago. Then I became a junior draftsman. Then I moved from there and I worked at the Science Rutherford High Energy Laboratory near Oxford, where we worked on, it's got an accelerator there where it accelerates particles, and it's very important to have a high vacuum. So we developed some very high vacuum technique systems.
Sounds very high-tech.
Very interesting indeed. Then I left there and went back to the original company where I was a designer as a sales engineer and travelled on most of Europe selling dehumidifiers for drying timber. Okay.
And then what did you do?
Then I actually left and became a freelance. A little bit reckless, actually. I didn't have any cash, 2 small children, you were one of them. But I still always felt I could earn a living, so I went off freelance selling as a sales engineer. And I met a man called Pat Cassie in Derby, in a hotel in Derby. And he worked for Bovis, and he wanted a dryer to dry houses in winter.
Okay, on construction sites?
Yes, house building. And so I went away and designed one. And then made it using subcontractors. I didn't have any facilities to make it myself, so we used subcontractors. Supplied the first 8. He then came back to me and wanted more.
On Uncle Tony's egg farm, was that?
Exactly right.
First? I don't remember it, but...
We did the very first product in a hen shed. And I remember buying our first MIG welder. It cost £48, and the 3 of us spent an hour debating whether we should buy it or not. So that's when it started.
And they're the building dryers.
Yes.
We still make those today. Part of the business still makes those.
That design
pretty much the same.
It was ahead of its time, and it's still appropriate today. It still sells well today.
Yeah, building dryers, construction site. You see them often when there's been floods, don't you, on the television?
Exactly.
See them in the background. People are using them to dry houses out. Are they more capacity or something?
Bigger capacity than these.
Okay.
And more robust.
Yep. So, and that leads us on to, of course, how did you then get from the application of the building dryer on the construction sites to the dehumidifiers for the home?
Right. I got a phone call from a man in Manchester. We had experience selling dehumidifiers, building dryers. We were quite successful. I got a phone call saying he'd bought some dehumidifiers, domestic dehumidifiers from America, and sold them all, and he wanted more. But he said, can you design one that's appropriate for the UK? Because the UK, we have different types of houses and the climate's different. So that's when the very first domestic dehumidifiers came into Europe, was through Ebac.
Okay, and just give a timeline?
About 1980.
1980. I mean, I do have recollections of trying to sell those because they were brand new. Nobody knew what
Absolutely
they were,
right.
did they? So, and we used to put them in Sunday newspapers.
We advertised in the news of the world.
Yeah. And the biggest thing was for people, they'd get it home. We left them with them for 2 weeks, and emptying the water out of the water container was the huge thing that convinced them that that's working. So that's where we got into the domestic dehumidifiers. They didn't look like this, of course.
No.
The first ones, they were smaller versions of the building dryers.
Similar size to this, but smaller than the building dryer, correct.
But smaller
and the timber dryers were even bigger than the building dryers.
Right, okay. So specialist application product.
That's right.
Same technology that came into
After working at very high temperatures, we're always good at innovating. We're always good at designing products to beat other people. We had a dehumidifier for drying timber that worked at the highest temperature than anyone else's, mainly sold in the Far East.
Okay, so lots of stuff that we've done there, but I get the stuff on the table here. This is all this is the most recent.
That's our latest design, yes.
For the home. So what's different to this one compared with those very first ones? I mean, for me, not being an engineer, the very obvious difference is that they were metal casing, the very first ones.
Yes.
And then we moved to MDF with vinyl on that looked like wood.
That's right.
I sort of,
that's the Humidex range.
Yes, Humidex. And then we went to the HD93s and we were trying to disguise them, weren't we?
Yes.
Didn't want anyone to know we've got a damp problem, so we've got a nice piece of furniture in the house.
That's right.
A dehumidifier disguised as a piece of furniture, because it just the
dehumidifiers come a long way since then.
Totally. But people have. And their thoughts of them.
If people got a dehumidifier now, it means you're taking care of your house.
Yes.
People thought then you had a problem with the house.
Yeah, dirty, damp, horrible.
Dampness, that's right. So, but now people accept we've all got excess moisture in homes and you need some means of controlling it. Yeah.
So we then came into the plastic.
Yeah, here we are.
Yeah. So what's that you've got there?
This is the raw material, plastic, ABS, and we take this.
And what happens? Why is what happens to that in the factory?
Well, we've got special machines. It's quite difficult. You've got to first dry it, and then drying again, and then you've got to take it to a very high temperature, which makes it into liquid. Then you pump it into a mold, which makes the shape you want, like that, for example.
Yeah, so components like.
And then you've got to cool it very quickly and take it out. So it's quite a delicate process to do, and we do that ourselves. We do the injection molding in the factory.
So all of the plastic that's on here, we
that's right.
mold those here in County Durham,
including this as well.
Yes,
plastic fan.
Yeah. And so what does that do? What
this moves the air through the machine, and you might look at that and see it's actually quite an irregular shape. Now that's intentional. That's designed to minimise the noise effect, because sound level is very important in dehumidifiers because it's in the home.
Yes. Yeah. And a different type of plastic, presumably.
That's right, absolutely different type to that.
So all of the plastic component parts we make there. Now we don't make these, but I think that this is how Ebac's changed, hasn't it?
That's another big change. Yes, that was something.
Tell me about.
Well, this coil is hydrophilically coated, and that means the moisture, it'll actually extract more water. This because it makes the water, it reduces the skin tension of the water to make sure it rolls quicker off the heat exchanger, meaning you get more heat transfer.
And what does that mean for me and my dehumidifier?
You get more water out per watt of energy.
Okay, so it's more efficient to run.
More efficient to run. It takes out more water at a lower cost of electricity.
More efficient to run. So, and then what are these?
Well, this is something, again, very unusual for Ebac. We just love making things. Yeah. Most companies of our size, even bigger companies, would not manufacture this. But this is a printed circuit board, electronic board there. We populate this with the components, which gives us this. This is done by a machine. And all these components here, electronic components, including switches, are assembled on there in the factory. Then we finally assemble it to this stage here, which becomes the two parts that make this. And this is the control system for the dehumidifier. This is digital controls. This made things very different, actually, compared to the old days when we had mechanical humidistats.
Yeah, they were sort of a plastic frame with like it looked like a plastic ribbon on it.
That's right, a nylon ribbon actually, which expands and shrinks depending on how much moisture is in it. But that's old technology. This is
would that switch off and on the dehumidifier when it reaches particular?
If you want a specific humidity.
Okay.
If you're in an occupied home controlling condensation and dampness, there isn't an optimum relative humidity, and that's why we use smart control, which takes a reading every hour and then decides the right time to run for your home.
Okay.
And that's unique to Ebac.
Yeah. So it learns about what you're doing in your house and changes itself to run when it should and not when it shouldn't.
So it solves the problem at the lowest energy cost. See, most domestic dehumidifiers of this size, if you look around the world in places like Singapore, there the temperature is totally different to the UK.
Yeah.
It's very warm and humid. That's a different kind of application. That's where humidistat's okay. But our climate is different. Okay. And we've got to make it work in our climate condition, different to the USA as well.
Yes, yeah, different. So we've moved on now. We've got these different products, the technologies moved on, and just sort of take me through again the smart control, because I think this is really key in terms of, you know, the difference of how the product works with the smart control and the humidistat control dehumidifiers. So am I right in thinking that this is patented technology?
That's right.
Smart control. So only the Ebac dehumidifiers have that.
It's unique to us,
I know
yes.
I'm going a bit salesy here, but one of the differences with the competition that's out there is that they are predominantly going to be humidistat controlled. Right. So they'll still work like a dehumidifier, but they won't be as effective and probably more expensive to run.
Definitely more expensive to run, because you've got to switch them off and on manually, and it's not possible to detect relative humidity. It's not like heat, you know when it's warm or cold, but you don't know when the humidity is too high. Therefore, you need it to be done automatically, electronically.
Okay. So I'm done there with my questions, I think, Graham. I've brought us right up to date.
Well, I'll step back in because we've had quite a few people watching and listening to what you have to say. Now, as a father and daughter team, by the way, you work together and you've been involved in bringing other products to the market as well, because Ebac is a great British manufacturer. Just let's touch on a couple of those. Washing machines, you were involved in that. You can buy washing machines from Ebac's website. Are they made in Britain?
They are. They are. Just like the dehumidifiers, we bring in raw materials and we construct them and assemble them. So we don't just stick the plug on at the end, which I think some made in Britain people claim. We actually do all of the fabrication, the injection moulding, we make the drum there.
I've seen robots flipping things around. I've seen men and women on production lines assembling them.
Yes, it's a very different process actually to this one. So we had to learn a lot. Or different techniques, and that's the brilliant thing about it.
It was your idea, Pamela. What Pamela said was this, and made common sense. She said to me, and the rest of the designers, you're good at designing things, so why not design something that's got a bigger market potential? She picked one of the most difficult ones, of course, washing machine, and we've succeeded in that because it is very well received.
And is it true that before you put that washing machine on the market, there were none really made in Britain?
Well, there were.
Well, there were years ago.
Yeah.
But most of the British brands actually have been bought out by others and are produced. It actually was interesting to me anyway that Italy seemed to be the capital of the washing machine world around Europe.
Because this is a thing about Ebac. It's dedicated to helping stop the imports. Because one way to deal with the trade battle that we have in this country is not just to export more, but to counter the imports.
Yeah, well, that's right. It's more environmentally friendly as well to make things here. We've got to make more things in the UK, and and it can be done.
And you're moving on to the next kind of thing, though, aren't you? Because there's another product in the pipeline. Yeah. Tell us about that.
Well, the air source heat pump, I think our air source heat pump is one of the best in the world. We've focused again on the UK climate. We're experts on the UK climate. We live here, and it's very efficient. We've got a COP of 5, which is almost unheard of.
What's COP mean?
That means for every kilowatt you put in, you get 5 kilowatts out.
I knew you'd have an explanation. Now, it strikes me that as the government legislates and the climate activists persuade when they're being persuasive, and as modern houses take on different forms of heating, if we didn't have a company in the UK making heat pumps, we'd have a huge additional balance of trade problem.
And the government are trying to deal with that, actually. The government are encouraging us, and they're wanting us to make more heat pumps in the UK. So the government are on side, actually, with this, and they're investing. In fact, it was announced about 2 weeks ago that they're going to put 4.5 million into environmentally friendly things, partly with the motor car industry and the aerospace, but a big chunk for green, including heat pumps.
So look, if you are going to be specifying heat pumps, do ask your contractor whether or not they can work with Ebac, because it is a British-made product, and you'll be helping the balance of trade and you'll be helping the environment.
But that's not the reason to buy, because it's British.
No, you're very keen on this.
We must never hide behind the flag. We must make it so people want to buy it because it's the best for them.
Now, this dehumidifier, this has been a fantastic product for several decades now, and you obviously think it's the best. 3 decades. 3 decades.
Four, I would say, actually.
But it isn't cheap and cheerful, is it? It's a high quality product. You're focusing on quality.
We never set about making the cheapest. But we make what's the cheapest in the total cost, the cost of owning it. We'll consume less power than all of our competitors because of our clever controls.
You know, at 27 pence a kilowatt now, that's a serious thing.
Even if it comes down, it's still a serious thing.
Yeah. Okay.
They're reliable as well.
Yes.
Well, I've actually got salesy, but they
well,
are
I don't
reliable.
need you to be salesy, because there's already a comment on our feed from, I think it's Ian, if I just read it. He said he's had 2 Ebacs in 8 18 years, and the last one lasted 12 years, and he's now using it to dry washing. He's a happy customer.
That's become a big thing, actually.
Drying washing.
Laundry, because if you don't dry it with a dehumidifier, you're putting water around your entire house and damaging the home. So the benefit of a dehumidifier is the water's in the bucket and you can pour it down the drain.
Because this thing about condensation, if you have an old house, single glazing, you'll probably have a bit of condensation. That's what you'd expect from an old house. But condensation, damp and moisture in the air isn't confined to older houses, is it?
Oh,
these modern houses.
No.
Tell us about that, John.
Every house where people live in them, we produce water by breathing, by boiling pans, by running baths. We produce moisture all the time. New present homes, all homes actually, are well sealed. So you've got to take that excess moisture out, else it'll do damage. The single glazing got more condensation, you're right. But double glazing, that condensation that went there goes somewhere else now. You just don't see it. So you've still got to take it out. The fact that you don't see condensation doesn't mean haven't got excess moisture.
Right, and that's a very good point. And I've got a modern house as well, and these things do take gallons. In fact, if you open the front there, Pamela, the people maybe don't realise there's a bucket in the front. John, tell us about this design.
Well, this is unusual as well. Most dehumidifiers that are imported from China, and look, I'm not saying Chinese products aren't good because things in China are made well, but it isn't as good for the UK. They tend not to have a bucket like this, and this is something you've got to empty every day. So it's important that it's easy to pick up and easy to pour, because you spill water on the floor isn't ideal. So that's something we're always trying to focus on, what customers value. You've got to deal with the bucket every 2 or 3 days, so it's very important to make a good bucket.
Now, we've had another one on our Facebook feed asking a question, and that is the dehumidifier. You see the size of it, but where would you put it? Is it going to go under the stairs? Is it going in the airing cupboard? Is it going in the bedroom? Where would you put a device like this?
I think the best place is usually the foot of the stairs or the top of the stairs. That's normally one door from every room. And moisture, if we produce moisture in a remote room, it will move to the dehumidifier. It's a law of physics says that when a dehumidifier reduces the vapor pressure around it, it attracts the moisture from the house. So put it in a central position as you can, and as cold as where you can actually. So the top of the stairs would not be the right place. And just leave it. Switch it on, leave it to smart to take care of it.
You were saying earlier when you were talking to John, people were amazed at how often they had to empty the bucket.
Yeah, when we first sold them, that was the thing. It was kind of like, no, you can't take my dehumidifier away, because they couldn't believe how much water was. It's all around then, isn't it? It
Well, it's soaking into the walls. It's soaking into the furniture. It's soaking everywhere. And in any rooms that are cold, you'll get high humidity. And once the humidity gets above 60 or 70%, you'll get mold growth, which is not healthy.
No. We've had a comment about having more than one dehumidifier. Do they compete against each other? Is there an issue of having more than one in the home?
You wouldn't normally need more than one. You can
Just don't have a humidifier and a dehumidifier. They'll fight it out.
Yeah.
Definitely not. I know who wins that one. I think you can take too much moisture out, actually. If you take about 1 litre to 2 litres a day, that's more than enough. There are some dehumidifiers that take a lot more out, but all you're bringing, you're sucking up to a point. You're sucking more moisture in then. So there's an area around about 1 litre a day is the right amount of water to take out in most houses. Right,
we've only got a couple of minutes left, so let's rattle through a few more of these questions. One person's making a point that this doesn't have casters and it can't be moved about.
Yeah, you can fit casters on them actually. They don't go with casters, but there are casters as an optional extra.
They aren't that heavy though, the newer ones.
Well, quite heavy. There is an option of casters. You can fit a caster on the bottom of each one. I'll not tip that one side down, but we can be supplied with casters. We don't supply it as standard, but you can buy the casters.
Thanks for that point. Thank you very much. Right, Angela, how expensive is it to run a dehumidifier? And are they noisy? And do they have to run all the time? She's giving us a few things here.
3 questions there. Let's take the last one first. They should be on all the time, but with smart control, it won't run all the time. It'll only run when it needs to. And that's normally about probably half the time. It depends on your home and depends on the weather conditions as well. But it will decide when to run. It needs to be on all day, but it won't run all the time.
Right.
That was the last
how
bit.
Expensive is it?
Well, this one takes about 160 watts.
Right.
So that means if it runs for 10 hours, which is probably fairly normal in a house, that's 1.6 kilowatts. Right. So that's 1.6 units of electricity. So if it's 30 pence a unit, that's
Right. Okay. So it's no more than 60p anyway.
A day.
All right. About 50p a day.
But you see, one which didn't have a good control might run all the time.
Yes.
And that would cost double that price.
Yes.
Or if it's a bigger performer than you need, and this is quite often actually, because some people push these very high performers thinking that's better, but in fact it isn't unless you've got a good control system. It just means you're wasting money, taking out too much water.
It does make your home feel a little bit drier as well, Graham, which I think is worth pointing out. That I think you can turn the temperature down on your heating a little bit, maybe just half a degree or a degree, and even not have the heating on for coming home too, because your house is nice and dry. You know, it might not be warm enough to sit in, but it feels better than coming into a cold, damp house.
Interesting.
But also it's quite interesting as well. The 160 watts that goes into that comes out in heat.
Yes.
So this, and it also, the heat, the condensing water gives a latent heat back into the system. So this will raise the heating in your house as well. So it means your heating will run less if you've got a dehumidifier on. Partly because you can accept the lower temperature and it's drier, and partly because this is...
It makes it warmer.
Yes. So the 160 watts, you get that all back in heat.
Yeah.
Okay. And what about the noise? You did mention the noise with the fan.
Well,
when you held the fan up.
They're not silent. We try to make them as quiet as we can, but we also want it to perform well. So it's a compromise that. They're not silent. I don't think most people could live with them in the bedroom. But
some people do actually.
I've got mine in the landing, and
nice white noise.
Yeah.
It's a nice white noise. Some people like tumble dryer noises.
It's like a hum.
You're right.
Yeah.
But equally, if it irritates you, it gets louder and louder and louder. So I think it's very subjective. We try and make it as quiet as we can, and you've got two speed choices, by the way. You can actually only the quiet speed or put it on boost if you need a bit of extra capacity.
Drying your washing, for example.
Yes, if you're on laundry mode, then you would. This has got laundry mode, and that means it runs all the time, offers 8 hours or whenever you select the time when you're drying your laundry.
Excellent.
And this one's got an app as well, actually, I should say.
Oh, everyone's got an app.
They don't. Not all dehumidifiers do, but yeah, this one does.
Yeah, what I meant was that you've made yourself completely trendy by having an app. Everything that comes together with that now, but you're the only dehumidifier of this nature that has one, so that's fantastic.
I think that's true. I'm not absolutely sure, but
would that mean I could be at home and you can turn it on?
Yes.
Oh, excellent. Oh,
well, I think that's personally, I think that's a bit gimmicky actually, but it's possible if you like that kind of thing. It's there to be done.
Well, I do it with the central heating, John.
Yeah.
Now, last question. This person, Martin, called, sort of typed in a few weeks ago when we did the trailer for this. I get condensation on the windows. Will this sort it out?
Yes. It'll reduce it significantly. It might still come back if it became very cold or you run a shower or something, but there'll be much less than you normally have. You know, it's a balancing act again. You can't take all the moisture out, otherwise that would be not very healthy. So you will, if you've got condensation out, it'll drop dramatically. Some days there'll be none, occasionally there'll be a small amount.
Well, John, it was fascinating hearing about your story and how you've developed this product. And Pamela, great news that you were able to persuade Dad to get the washing machines fired up, and you can buy them online. Ebac.com has all these products and they can be bought online. And if you want the actual heat pumps, you have to ask your specifier to get in touch because they sell to specifiers. That's it for this broadcast on Facebook. Stay following our feeds for more information about great British products from Ebac for your home.